The new cruise missile in Ukrainian service is reportedly about 2.5 times longer and 4 to 5 times heavier than the modern Tomahawk cruise missile. As is known, compactness in these devices helps overcome enemy air defenses. At first glance, things look bad for the Ukrainian Flamingo. The American cruise missile has a radar cross-section of 0.1 square meters. What might the Flamingo's radar cross-section be? Well, for example, the Tupolev 141 Strizh drone has a radar cross-section of up to 1.5 square meters. While the Flamingo and Strizh have different designs, their stated specifications show nearly identical dimensions. Both of these models have an air intake on top of the fuselage, which significantly increases their visibility. The large open engine nozzle increases their radar visibility. However, some of the Flamingo's body uses composite material, which shields signals differently than the Strizh's aluminum alloy. However, the upper part of the Ukrainian engine's casing is still made of duralumin because of the high temperature around the turbojet engine. Ukrainian engineers, possibly under a British license, developed a cruise missile with a large radar cross-section like an aircraft, but lacking evasive maneuver capability. It's like an aircraft, an easy target for Russian air defense. Any Soviet-era surface-to-air missile can shoot down this cruise missile. I wasn't comparing the Flamingo and the Tupolev 141 Strizh, which a Ukrainian genius turned into a strike drone, for no reason. The thing is, even the Tupolev 141 Strizh managed to get through Russia's layered air defense and hit not just insignificant facilities, but airfields with strategic aviation. On December 5, 2022, the Russian Ministry of Defense said a modified Soviet Tupolev 141 drone reached the Diaghilevo airfield and was shot down. Of course. However, its debris hit a fuel truck and the explosion damaged the fuselage of a Tupolev 22 M3 supersonic missile carrier. Another case of Strizh drones being used was recorded at the Engels 2 airbase, where 2 Tupolev 95S were reportedly damaged. At the very least, security cameras captured the fact that Strizh drones reached the airfield. The main intelligence directorate of Ukraine's defense ministry later confirmed in a film that the airfields were attacked specifically by modified Soviet Tupolev 141 SOE.
A little later, closer to morning, a Strizh drone flew to another Russian airbase, Engels in the Saratov region, in exactly the same way. A surveillance camera in a nearby district recorded the explosion. 2 Tupolev 95 missile carriers were damaged. Both Diaghilevo and Engels are 500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. It's the first time our forces have reached that far.
So, it can be stated with a high degree of confidence that Russia will have difficulty intercepting targets like the Flamingo cruise missile. But the question remains, why, despite being announced more than a month ago, is the missile hardly being used? Only one incident has been publicly confirmed. And open source intelligence analysts, in particular the Telegram channel Okugora, link in the description, recorded a strike on a Federal Security Service border base near Armyansk. Based on the 13-meter wide crater, the object was struck by a cruise missile with a warhead of roughly 1 ton. Yes, the buildings appear as small red corrugated metal hangars in photos, but that's a scale misperception. Compare them to the cars nearby. The length of the burned-out building is 30 meters, like a 10-story building laid on its side. So the strike was serious, and judging by the crater left by the missile that missed, it's obvious these weren't drones. So, after all, the Flamingo cruise missile is in service with Kiev, and it is capable of hitting its targets even if not always. Although, apparently, its production remains limited for now. But then the next question arises. Why announce the product in advance, giving the enemy time to prepare for the new challenge? Not saying I know the truth, let's talk about it.
Now, regarding attacks on the energy infrastructure, in particular from the Ukrainian side, for a long time, even a couple of years ago, we didn't take any actions at all concerning civilian infrastructure. And for a long time, especially during the winter period, we endured when Ukrainian forces were constantly striking our energy facilities. After that, we started to respond.
Of course, there are different kinds of lies. But this lie from Putin is just disgusting. The head of a nuclear power lies like some cowardly hedgehog. Russia started targeting Ukrainian civilians by cutting off electricity in September 2022 after its mercenary army was ousted from the Kharkiv region. On September 11th, a strike hit Kharkiv Thermal Power Plant 5, marking the start of the targeted destruction of the energy infrastructure. It lasted over 3 years with few pauses, continuing until the major attack on Ukrainian energy infrastructure on January 15, 2025. Ukraine, on the other hand, struck Russian oil refining facilities for the first time only in January 2024, and these attacks continued until February 2025. And then there was a lull. In March, the Kremlin officially released a document claiming it resulted from an agreement with Donald Trump. It mentioned a moratorium on strikes against critical infrastructure like oil refineries, power plants, gas pipelines, pumping stations, nuclear plants, and more.
Donald Trump also confirmed the compromise in his post.
But let me remind you that, as always, Russia was the first to break the moratorium. Already on June 15th, they struck the Kremenchuk oil refinery and then the gas station in Odessa. It's true, they really didn't touch electricity generation. Since August, Ukraine's defense forces have resumed regularly targeting Russian oil refineries. By the time this video was recorded, they had damaged 13 refineries. Except for one strike on the Trypilska thermal power plant, Russia hasn't targeted the energy sector yet. It's interesting. Why is that? Moreover, Ukraine's defense forces are striking not only oil refineries. A certain pressure must be maintained in the pipeline transporting crude oil or petroleum products. That's why every 100 to 200 kilometers along the pipeline route, there must be oil pumping stations with pumps to maintain pressure in the underground pipe, so that the liquid flows through it and doesn't stagnate. And it just so happens that the entire oil pipeline infrastructure runs close to Ukraine, right within the range of the hypothetical but not mythical Sapsan operational tactical missile system, whose warhead is powerful enough to take out the entire underground infrastructure of the station. So, if you destroy the main oil pumping stations here, and here, it would basically deprive Russia of the ability to transport hydrocarbons to the main ports from which fuel and lubricants are exported. This video of mine from May 21, 2024 caused a lot of criticism. Like, yeah, it's all 3D graphics, everything is exploding somehow, but it's all just some kind of fantasy. Well, here we are in 2025, so let's analyze my past fantasies. This year, Ukrainian Defense Forces drones hit 2 oil pumping stations in Krasnodar, disrupting petroleum deliveries to Novorossiysk port. There was a successful strike on the Kiev-Torovo oil pumping station. The diagram shows its role in the system. Then, the Nikolskoye oil pumping station in the Tambov region was hit. And of course, let's not forget about the strike on the Unecha oil pumping station, which for some reason didn't sit well with the Hungarians and Slovaks. But the main thing is that I'm only noting the successful strikes. Ukrainian drones also targeted other major oil pumping stations, such as Kalykino, but did not succeed. But this isn't the end. At least on my map, I imagine several more destroyed oil pumping stations. Let's see, maybe it will come true. My assumption that Russia's oil product pipelines are highly vulnerable and would be targeted by Kiev was correct. The main issue is that this caused problems, as Transneft openly admits. We're seeing not just strikes on oil pumping stations, but a systematic shutdown of the entire hydrocarbon delivery system.
We put up with it for a very long time when Ukrainian forces were constantly striking our energy facilities. After that, we started to respond. And of course, we are responding, well, let's say seriously.
Russia, which started the war against Ukraine in 2014 and launched a full-scale invasion in 2021, from the very first days of the full-scale war, was striking oil depots and Ukrainian oil refineries. That's why any wording like Russia's response to Ukraine's attacks is by definition propaganda and also disgustingly cowardly. In reality, it is Ukraine that is responding to aggression by targeting oil refineries, responding to the daily terror against the civilian population for 4 years. Now, without emotions, why didn't Putin launch major strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure after 13 Russian oil refineries were damaged, and should we expect them? Clearly, there's a plan to leave Ukrainians without heat this fall and winter. It's likely already being discussed in the Kremlin. Considering that colder weather in Eastern Europe will start in about a month, Moscow most likely has enough resources to force Ukraine back into rolling blackouts again.
However, there is also a factor that can make adjustments to these calculations.
We're talking about the Flamingo cruise missile, the very same device we started our video with.
The maximum range is 3,000 kilometers with an accuracy of 14 meters at that distance. The maximum speed is 900 kilometers per hour. The cruising speed can vary, and I won't disclose that. The payload capacity is now 1,150 kilograms, up from the original 1,000 after we found a way to increase it.
The range is 3,000 kilometers. Right now it's hard to say how accurate the stated specifications are. Moreover, it's too early to say that the Flamingo cruise missile is a fully finished production item. Remember, developing the American Tomahawk took 12 years, while the Russian Kek-101 took 15 years. Firepoint, however, developed a Ukrainian cruise missile in only 3.5 years. Even if some components are produced under license, but the main thing is that it exists, it flies, and it is capable of hitting targets. That's already enough to consider it a deterrent factor. It can be assumed that if Russian attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure resume, this factor will be taken seriously.
Perhaps that's exactly why Ukraine demonstrated its new weapon. To make it clear to Moscow, attacks on power plants will be met with a response.
After all, Russia is just as vulnerable in this area as Ukraine. Open source intelligence analyst and energy expert Braken Ruski has spent years marking what he sees as top priority Russian strike targets on Google Maps via his Twitter. And this is the most vulnerable link in the entire energy system of Russia. We're talking about large power transformers. In fact, there's no secret here. Moscow deliberately cut electricity to Ukrainian elderly, targeting them. The analyst's link will be in the description. Russia relies on them more than Ukraine. So what is a large power transformer? It's a massive device weighing about 300 tons and costing $10-20 million. It's needed to convert the voltage received from the power plant generators. The large power transformer increases voltage for transmission, and more transformers are located at the end of the power lines. Maybe they're not as big anymore, and they lower the voltage to supply it to consumers in their homes.
Who doesn't know why the voltage must be increased first?
This allows huge amounts of energy to be transmitted over power lines for thousands of kilometers with losses of only 3 to 5%. If you don't do this, the losses will be enormous, depending on the distance. And as you know, Russia is not a small country compared to Ukraine. Returning to Braken Ruski's map, he identified and marked the key large power transformers. Disabling them would actually stop part of Russia's key industries and lead to blackouts. The expert calculated how many large power transformers need to be disabled to actually cause the collapse of the entire system, and that's just 70 units. Braken Ruski again marked the priority on the map. Replacing this transformer quickly is very difficult, and for Russia under sanctions, nearly impossible.
They're costly and take over a year to build. Even China couldn't help the Russian Federation with this.
Moreover, all the most important large power transformers are located quite close to the Ukrainian border. Of course, they understand this in Moscow as well. Ukraine previously lacked the ability to destroy both large power transformers and the power plants themselves, including thermal and combined heat and power plants. But with the appearance of Flamingo, this possibility has now emerged. So I don't know what decision has been made in the Kremlin regarding a new energy terror campaign against Ukrainians, but it's certain that Kyiv will have something to respond with.
All they have is 3 or 4 so-called items. So now, of course, this is an important moment. Well, fine, they have the items. Even military experts who are loyal to Ukraine. I won't mention their name, but we found their comments in English, in German, and even in Russian. This missile is as noticeable as, a heavily made-up woman going somewhere for inappropriate business. And it's not even about the pink tip, and it's not about the energy of what the politician wrote about. The structure of this missile is such that, in principle, it will be visible on all radars, and for Russian air defense, shooting it down will not be a problem at all.
Yes, I understand that now there will be Z supporters who will say that this is all on paper, it's all theory, it's all scare tactics from a supporter of Ukraine. In 2023, when the first Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicle Boba appeared, we correctly calculated that this and similar drones would become a serious problem for the mighty Russian air defense. Today, our calculations are confirmed. Russia can defend its key oil refineries from slow-moving drones. Then, as I mentioned above, we talked about how effective Ukraine's strikes on Russian oil pumping stations could be and that they would definitely target them. And now they have. Here it is. Transneft is warning oil companies about possible reductions in oil deliveries through its pipelines due to Ukrainian attacks. So, of course, the Zetniks can laugh at this video too. They may laugh as their weak aerospace forces again target Ukrainian energy infrastructure, hoping to break the people's will. But I want to warn them right away. When they, like today's car owners, who are indignantly recording videos about rising gas prices and shortages, start making similar videos about sudden power outages, let them not forget about 2 things.
First, their rhetorical questions about why this happened and where these sudden disruptions came from will sound just as naive and ridiculous as today's complaints about the disappearance of fuel.
Second, few people will see their videos.
The internet usually doesn't work without electricity.
What's all the hype about? I don't get it. It's artificial. 100%.
Verlivka, what's up with the gas? I'm honestly shocked.
Some gas stations only accept coupons. What is this, the Soviet Union?
Man, what are these prices? What are these numbers?
They say there may be a fuel problem too.
Elections are done, prices rose. Oh my god.
Is there anyone who can solve this problem?
Please explain to me, how can it be that in a country that extracts oil and produces gasoline, let's say, runs out of gasoline?
Hello, friends. What's up with your fuel? The second one is 90 rubles, the fifth one is 96.
Oh my gosh, I wish I hadn't seen that.
We had 58 for 92 before, and now it's 71.80. There are rumors going around that there's simply no gasoline.
Let's not forget that this is just the beginning, friends. This is just the beginning.
The fuel shortage problem will likely be resolved eventually. Yes, gasoline prices will be higher, but the market will adjust, you understand. At the same time, the strikes on the oil refinery should not be seen solely as an attempt to create a fuel market crisis and deprive the Kremlin of part of its income. The problem is deeper. Knocking out oil refining capacities and, more importantly, oil pumping stations creates a surplus of unsellable crude oil in Russia, which simply has nowhere to go. Reuters writes about this in their article. Here we have both the loss of the ability to pump it continuously through pipelines and a shortage of oil depots capable of storing crude black gold.
And this leads to a reduction in production, which Transneft has stated directly.
But what does a reduction in production mean?
It means shutting down wells, making them impossible or very costly to restart. What I'm saying is that the Russian Federation is gradually losing not just its super profits, but also parts of its critical industrial sectors. Strikes against Russia can't just be viewed in terms of short-term economics. They're about strategically undermining Russia's foundation.
I'm not saying this to try to reason with the crazed Z supporters or to draw their attention to the fact that the special military operation hasn't exactly gone according to plan.
I'm more talking about the fact that an isolated Russia, even if it's losing its resource base very, very slowly, will inevitably become increasingly dependent on its big Chinese brother.
Who, believe me, won't miss the chance to use such an asset for his own interests?
How exactly? We'll talk about that in the next video. Don't miss it. Although, as always, it's up to you to be or